This is Talk to Seattle, and I'm your host, Jason Rigden. On this episode, I have Sasha Anderson, who is running for Seattle City Council in the 4th District. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, maybe your background and experience?
Sure thing. Well, let's see. In kind of a large nutshell, I was born and raised on a rural working farm in Oregon, and I moved up to Seattle to attend undergrad at Seattle University in 1998. And then after graduation, I went on to work in education with local Seattle schools, moved on to volunteer and work with the Peace Corps in West Africa, also within the field of education. And then when I came back, I really launched into my nonprofit career. And so I worked with various local nonprofits in different capacities. A few of those were Earthshare of Washington and Pause. And as I was examining my career and where I wanted to go, I realized that if I really wanted to be a true social change maker and have the tools in my toolkit to be a truly effective leader, I would need to go back to graduate school. So I then went on to pursue my graduate education at Brandeis University, and I did a double master's degree in sustainable international development and coexistence and conflict. And what those big sounding words translates to is working in places that are growing quickly to do so in a way that is inclusive and benefits everyone living there. And then also to work with people who have opposing views, sometimes vehemently so, to help them find value in one another's viewpoints and opinions, and then help them to work together, whether it's on policy, whether it's in the workplace, so on both a micro and macro level. Following my education there, I started a consulting firm with 3 international colleagues, and I still work with that firm called Honest Brokers in an advisory capacity. And at this point, I was back on the East Coast and really wanted to come back to Seattle. And so I made the move back out here, and that's where I took on a job with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, which is where currently I'm running a mentoring program out of West Seattle High School, where I work with approximately 60 mentors and 60-ish students, and we do college and career preparedness. A lot of the students are at risk for not graduating, so the program is really looking at how to prep students to make sure that they have a successful future. And that's kind of, again, me in a very large nutshell.
And what made you want to run for this office in particular?
Yeah, that's a good question. In anything that I do in my life, whether personal or professional, I always ask myself if I'm doing as much as I can and what can I be doing that will have a greater impact. And I had really seen my career taking more of an international trajectory. When I used to look at what I wanted to do, I thought potentially I would work at the UN or at the World Bank. And then when the 2016 elections happened, I really saw how vulnerable our country is, and not just our country, but our cities. But in kind of that vulnerability that we could slide backwards, I also see a lot of opportunity. Right now we see cities really taking the lead in climate change policies and making areas more livable, more affordable, and having open and welcoming communities. And I see Seattle, a city that I love and am so excited to be a part of, and I want what's best for our city and our people. And when I looked at my background and my experience, what I'm really good at, and it just fit so perfectly with the role of a city council person. And that's really why I wanted to get involved specifically here, because I think we're at a point where we're really trying to reconcile who we were as a smaller city and who we're becoming as a city that's growing so quickly. And I think I want to be a person that's taking on a leadership role to help us grow in a positive and inclusive direction.
Could you tell me a little bit about your district?
Yeah. So District 4, which really only came into existence in terms of district lines in 2015, is in Northeast Seattle. We start in Eastlake, and it goes up and loops around parts of Wallingford, Ravenna, Roosevelt, and then down to the Sandpoint, Windermere, Laurelhurst area. And it's made up of folks from various backgrounds. We have renters, homeowners, families, students, blue and white collar workers, wealthy and folks managing to get by, older folks, kind of you name it, we've got it in our district.
And what are some of the biggest challenges facing your district?
Yeah, so we've got a lot. And, a lot of the challenges facing our district are the same ones that are facing our city. One of the big ones that I've been hearing from constituents that I've been out talking with is really keeping seniors in their homes. A lot of people are feeling overtaxed or priced out. We have a lot of folks who bought their homes decades ago, and they're worried that they may not be able to stay there because they see their property taxes rising, they see their utilities rising. However, their incomes are staying stagnant. I talked with just so many people who are afraid they won't be able to stay. And that's not only seniors, that's also renters who are seeing price increases. We're seeing the chance of displacement grow as we get more transit in. And there's also, that's tied in really with that issue of affordability. There's also, in the next few years coming up, we have 2 new light rail transit areas popping up. And so I don't necessarily see that as a huge challenge. It definitely is. I think the challenge in that is making sure we have true last mile solutions to get people to these new transit centers easily and quickly. And then let's see, another one that hasn't really been talked about that much are the sewer. It's not a sexy subject by any means, but the sewer systems in District 4 are beyond their age limit, meaning they're going to break at any minute. I've been talking with different scientists and stormwater folks who know a lot more about this issue than I do, and it's tied into housing affordability, especially because homeowners are responsible if anything breaks with their sewer. And this can cost a homeowner anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 that they have to pay up front. So for these same folks that are feeling cost-burdened and overtaxed, having a large chunk of money that they have to pay immediately could oftentimes be the thing that breaks the camel's back. And then right now, it's over 3/4 of the sewer system within District 4 is going to need to be replaced within the next 10 to 20 years. And I haven't really been hearing it talked a lot about, but I see that as a huge issue, especially because it's directly tied into affordability with housing.
And what do you think are the biggest issues facing the city as a whole?
Yeah, going back really to housing and affordability, I think, not only are they extremely hot topics right now, but they really are such a huge issue. We have such a demand, and we are not meeting the supply of that. And that's where we see a lot of, uptick in people having to leave their homes. It's not necessarily that folks will become homeless, which is definitely happening, but also where people are having to pick up and leave an area where they've been a significant portion, if not all of their life, because they can no longer afford it. For instance, the woman who had lived in the house that my fiance and I now rent is now having to move and look at houses in Tacoma. And she's in her 70s, and her community was in our neighborhood, and that's where she lived and where people supported her. And now she's having to look all the way down to Tacoma, and she doesn't know anyone there. And this is a story that we're seeing. I've heard many, many times, and I think we all have, and that's something that's a citywide issue.
How can the city help homeless folks?
I think first and foremost, we need to take a compassionate approach, and that's really recognizing that homeless folks are not one single mass of people who are struggling with the same issues. It's a very diverse population, much like Seattle. You have youth who are dealing with homelessness. You have families, couples. People are in short-term or long-term homelessness. Some are addicted, some are not. Some have jobs, some don't. Some are living in cars, some are not. There's so much going on. And so I think, again, taking that compassionate approach to recognize and meet people where they're at is something really important. And I think what we need to keep doing is to scale what's working. Examples of that are the organization Youth Care. They do such amazing programs for so many homeless youth, again, whether they're dealing with short-term or long-term homelessness, supporting more organizations like that, supporting affordable housing nonprofits who are working to provide more housing for folks. And some representatives I've chatted with from different housing nonprofits are saying they've been doing this for years. They know how to do it. What's happening is they're lacking the funds and the space to do their work well and to provide housing for people that need it. So I think supporting those programs and scaling up on what's working as well are the primary ways that we can start to, but to continue to address and help homeless folks.
What can the city do to help improve transportation?
The city has already been taking large strides to do that. For example, Vision Zero is huge, and that's the program the initiative where the goal is to have zero fatalities from pedestrian or bicyclist deaths. And a part of that is the large bike master plan that we saw come out of that. I think, really focusing and continuing to refocus on Vision Zero is something huge, because no one wants any pedestrian or bicyclist, any type of preventable fatality. And that's one thing the city's been doing really well. And that continues to focus on public safety. One thing in District 4 that I've been hearing a lot of people talk about and really wanting are more light-up crosswalks, especially in high pedestrian traffic zones. People oftentimes, not with any malintent, but will, be on their way home from work and are going a little too fast, and maybe will pass by folks who are trying to cross before they even realize they're there. And so when we have more light up crosswalks, it's really increasing pedestrian safety. And I think another way the city's been working to improve transportation is also with light rail. Like I mentioned, we have 2 new stations opening up in District 4 alone in 2021. And if encouraging the city and really working with the city, especially in a position as a city council member, to make sure those last mile solutions are efficient, they're easy, they're quick for folks to get from their house to the light rail, whether that's in a bus, whether it's biking, whether it's walking. I think those are ways that we can really improve our transportation. And the final one that I had just heard being started, it's just now being talked about, or I could also be late to the game, is a congestion tax that would start downtown, similar to the one that New York City just passed. And that would be a small fee for cars that are within the downtown limits of the city within certain hours. So not all the time, but it's also a way to help fund costs for roads, and then to help encourage people to take transit rather than ride in their vehicle.
And what can the city do to help improve housing affordability?
Yeah, I think there's a decent amount of things the city can do. Again, one big thing that the city just did last week was pass mandatory housing affordability. And that was only 5% of the city that is getting rezoned. So I think expanding that to have more mixed housing. An example of this is I had learned about in the latest Neighborhoods for All report is that before the late 1950s, when downzoning was passed in Seattle, it was all mixed-use housing, so single-family housing, duplexes, triplexes, and the neighborhoods where people really want to live right now. For example, a couple of them, say Queen Anne and Wallingford in District 4, were those really mixed-use neighborhoods where you had such a diversity of housing options. So I think having more mixed housing is really key for housing affordability, because that goes back to, really kind of simple economics with supply and demand. we have such a demand and little supply. We really need to work as hard as we can to increase that supply. I think also I had been looking into townhouses and row houses, and those are not legal in a significant portion of Seattle. So if we can really work to incorporate more townhouses, more row houses, legalize the building of those across the city, I think that would do a lot to help add to that supply. And finally, I think another important thing we can do for housing affordability is we could raise the income ceiling for seniors who need a break on their property taxes and their utilities. Right now, seniors cannot make more than $30,000 a year if they want to get a tax break on their property taxes or on their utilities. And that's just not a realistic income for folks to have to stay under. I worry about the quality of life and the stress it adds to have to live so frugally. I think one important thing we can do is raise that ceiling as much as possible to help more people fall under it.
We live in very polarized times. How would you as a city leader work to bring people together?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And, that's one of the big reasons I got involved in the race is that's my background. My degrees, my experience, it's really about bringing folks together, especially folks who don't necessarily see eye to eye. And I think that starts with having conversations and providing opportunities for people from all different backgrounds to get together and spend time together, whether that's at community conversations, potlucks, it could be through volunteer work, restoration projects, just providing as many opportunities as possible for people to come together and get to know one another as people and not just through their priorities or through what they may see people post on their social media, but really providing more time for authentic connection. As a leader, I would also commit to attend community and neighborhood meetings. For instance, in my neighborhood, the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association meets once every couple of months. And I think as a city leader, it's really important that we're out there in the community talking with people. And I would want to commit to attend one of these meetings per quarter at each of the neighborhoods. So Wallingford has their own, everyone kind of has their own get-togethers. And I think it would be very important and beneficial as a councilwoman to come to these. Another way would be to have office hours in the evenings in District 4 in different locations. Again, just really providing the opportunity for people to connect one-on-one, whether individually with myself or in groups. I think that those are ways that you really truly bring people together, and also that people can relate to you and share ideas with you. Those are just a few examples of the things that I would do.
And if people want to learn more about your campaign, where should they go?
Oh, well, they can go to my website, and that is sashafor4.org. That's my first name, SASHA, and then FOR, the number 4.org. You can also Google my name and follow it with The Stranger and read more about me and who I am, my goals, in an interview I did with a local reporter as well. And excuse me, I'm getting better at this. At Facebook and Instagram at Sasha4, and then Twitter at elect Sasha4.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Talk to Seattle, and I've been your host, Jason Rigden. If you want to support the show, would you please follow us on social media? We're at Talk to Seattle on both Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for listening.